behind the scenes of a movie. There's more to a story than just action and drama. This is where we bring you extraordinary stories with a different style, a true plot, and a meaning that's felt. Welcome to Latest Movie Stories, a place where stories aren't just watched, they're felt. The film was opened in Mexico with a boy named Miguel who returned from school. This boy secretly fell in love. He only placed something for his girlfriend, who was also his neighbor. But before he could get lost in his little romance, his mother Rosa told him to focus on his school. At the same time, Rosa's phone rang. He is Carlos, Uncle Miguel. With a panic tone, Carlos told Rosa to run and hide as far as possible, because the most brutal mafia cartel in Mexico chasing them. It turned out that Carlos was captured by a cartel and tortured poorly. From there, they found that the last person contacted by Carlos was Rosa. Now Rosa is also in the cartel list. The scene then shifted to Naco, Arizona, where a mysterious man watched the border from a distance. He's Jim Hanson, a former Marine who is now living a quiet life as a breeder near the border. But make no mistake, his life is not as beautiful as dusk. One day he saw his livestock. Jim saw a wolf who attacked one of the cows. Really unlucky. Right when he is looking for peace. In addition to being a breeder, Jim also works as a border supervision. Sometimes reports the appearance of illegal immigrants who cross from Mexico. Daily life is mostly spent caring for his breeders. But that was not a peaceful life. Jim lost his wife a year ago due to chronic disease. Medical bills make a lot of debt to the bank. Now that he hasn't paid his bills for 6 months, Jim is at risk of losing his ranch. So, he decides to sell all of his cattle. But he begins to hesitate when the buyer offers a very low price.
Like I said, you've got 90 days, most likely.
I'm sorry, Jim, let me know.
Jim also has a stepdaughter named Sarah, who works as a customs officer stationed at the Arizona-Mexico border. Although their relationship is distant, Sarah still cares about her stepfather.
What is going on?
The next day, in a different place, we see Rosa and her son Miguel, accompanied by a man Rosa has paid to help them cross into America. They're walking through the area, looking for a hole in the fence often used by illegal immigrants to cross into Arizona. But suddenly, they spot a cartel vehicle patrolling the area. The man quickly tells Rosa where the hole in the fence is, and then he runs away, leaving them behind. While driving along the road, Jim Hanson casually spoke with his dog, enjoying a calm moment. But suddenly, he slammed the brakes. Out of nowhere, Miguel ran across the street, and Jim almost crashed into him. That's when Jim saw Rosa and Miguel, clearly panicked and ran away from something. Before he could find out what was happening, the cartel vehicle appeared. They had found them. Cartel members stop and face Jim. One of them, a bald man named Mauricio, tried to deceive Jim. He claimed he was a soldier under the official order to bring Rosa and Miguel again across the border. But Jim, being a retired Marine, is not so easily fooled. He did not trust Mauricio and decided to stand up and protect Rosa and Miguel.
All by yourself, huh? Marine Corps.
The situation becomes tense, then the shot breaks. One of Mauricio's troops was killed in a shootout. Now Mauricio caught fire with hatred, angry because the people had been shot and that Rosa and Miguel had sneaked away.
Tu hermano.
Rosa was seriously injured. When he lay dying, he begged Jim with his last breath. Don't let them take Miguel. He handed over a piece of paper with his cousin's address in Chicago, begging him to make his son safe. After that, the border patrol officer arrived and took Rosa's body away. Jim, still shaken, brought Miguel to the customs office to explain the situation. That night, he slept in his truck with his faithful dog beside him. The next morning, Jim noticed that Rosa's bag was still in his truck. Out of curiosity, he looked inside, and what inside it surprised him. Some cash. That's when everything made sense. Rosa had stolen cartel money, taken from her brother Carlos. Now Jim understands why the cartel really wants to find it. They not only pursue Rosa and Miguel, they also pursue their money, and they won't stop until they get it back. Jim made the decision to go home, but he didn't know that more danger was waiting for him ahead. Jim continued to remember Rosa's last words, to never let Miguel fall into the cartel's hands, And of course, the cartel has arrived at the immigration office, waiting for Miguel to be deported. As soon as Jim arrived at the office, he asked the officer about Miguel. Officers said someone who claimed to be his family Miguel was already there to pick him up, but Jim, suspicious, he asked to talk to Miguel for a moment before being handed over.
Say he's got a relative waiting for him on the other side.
Let's go. Come on.
When Miguel entered Jim's truck, they immediately left. But Cartel, watching from a distance, turning their movements and starting to follow them. Jim rushes home to grab some clothes and supplies. However, when he opens the car door, Miguel is gone. After searching around, Jim finds him again and finally explains, "The cartel is after you. They want you dead." And how the cartels were able to enter the US using fake visas and passports, and some law enforcement officials turned a blind eye because they were paid. Meanwhile, at Jim's house, Mauricio, a bald cartel member, breaks in and rummages through Jim's house, looking for clues. Back to Jim, he stops for gas and goes to a store to buy a map to navigate to Chicago, the address Rosa gave him. But unbeknownst to Jim, the radiator in his car has been damaged and is leaking. Elsewhere, in Vista, Arizona, Mauricio hands an envelope containing Jim's personal information to his men and orders them to track him down. After a night on the run, Jim called his stepdaughter Sarah and got devastating news. His house had burned down. It was clearly the work of the cartel. Still, Jim insisted Sarah keep his whereabouts a secret so she wouldn't get dragged into the mess.
Jim, you put my ass on the line here.
Meanwhile, Mauricio and his men weren't giving up. They managed to track Jim's location using his credit card transaction from a gas station in New Mexico. On the road to Chicago, Jim's car suddenly started smoking. The radiator had failed and the engine was overheating. He pulled into a small repair shop, but since it was closing time, the mechanic told him the fix would have to wait until the next morning. Back at the gas station, Mauricio showed up and questioned the store clerk. But her short, unfriendly responses only made him more suspicious that Jim had recently passed through. The next morning, Jim wakes up to find Miguel and his dog missing. Concerned, he checks Rosa's bag, but everything inside is intact. A few moments later, Miguel returns, with groceries. The kid is gone, and he's up early. After the car is repaired, they continue their journey. However, they don't realize that every time Jim uses his credit card, a notification pops up telling them their location. Later, during the journey, Jim is suddenly stopped by a patrol car. At first, it seems like a routine stop, and Jim does as he's told, getting into the police car. However, something feels off. The cops' movements and behavior seem odd. That's when Jim spots a cartel vehicle approaching in the distance. Realizing he's trapped, Jim quickly takes care of the corrupt officer and speeds away with Miguel, escaping another deadly ambush by the cartel. After stopping at a safe spot, Jim monitors the situation from atop a rock, while making sure no one is following him. But as he leaves, Mauricio finds Jim's book that he accidentally dropped. Another clue to the cartel. Realizing things were getting more dangerous, Jim headed to a gun shop to buy a pistol for protection. However, the shop owner needed to verify Jim's ID and background before proceeding with the sale. At first, things looked tricky, but after Jim explained his situation, the seller finally agreed to let him buy the weapon.
I gotta live with it. So long as it's for the right.
Jim then called Sarah, his stepdaughter, to get an update on the situation. But instead, Sarah revealed a shocking truth. Carlos, Miguel's uncle, had stolen money from the cartel, and that's why they were hunting down Miguel and his mother in the first place. Hearing that, Jim shared his current location with Sarah, who was now in Texas and promised to come help him.
I'll kill myself.
In the Texas Panhandle somewhere.
While waiting for Sarah's team to arrive, Jim decides to find a place to stay. He checks into a motel and checks into a room without showing any ID or credit card, so he won't be traced. But unfortunately, when Jim goes out to walk his dog, he sees some strangers in the motel's registration area. His instincts kick in. It's the cartel. They've infiltrated and are now trying to figure out which room Jim and Miguel are staying in. Just when Jim realized the cartel had arrived at the motel, he immediately called emergency services, reporting a robbery at the Blackwood Hotel. His plan? To lure the police in and scare the cartel away. Sure enough, not long after, the sound of police sirens echoed through the area, causing chaos and confusion. But as Jim went back to get his beloved dog, he was too late. He saw Mauricio just about to get into his car, and his dog had already been killed. Jim was devastated, frozen in shock, a mix of grief and fury all over his face. It was heartbreaking. Later, Jim buried the dog's body, with Miguel standing quietly beside him. Miguel tried to comfort Jim, saying the dog was now resting peacefully in heaven. But instead of calming down, Jim snapped. He told Miguel to forget about such beliefs. The two of them ended up in a heated argument. Frustrated and overwhelmed, Jim blurted out that bringing Miguel to Chicago was a big mistake, and he was now planning to send him back to Mexico. Crushed by the words, Miguel silently walked away, head down, disappearing into the nearby woods. Realizing his mistake, Jim quickly followed and luckily managed to convince Miguel to come back. After that, Jim called Sarah and told her he had made up his mind. He was going to take Miguel to Chicago no matter what. He said he no longer trusted any system to keep Miguel safe.
I'm doing what his mother asked. I'm taking him to her family.
Meanwhile, one of Mauricio's men found a clue in the map that Miguel had dropped. There was a big red circle around the Chicago area. Mauricio then called one of his contacts in Chicago, giving them a full description of Jim's vehicle. After a long journey and endless escape, Jim and Miguel finally arrive near the Chicago border. On the way, Jim takes Miguel to a quiet place and teaches him how to shoot properly, not for fun, but as a survival skill that might come in handy later. That night, they both shared stories about their loved ones who were no longer around. It was an emotional and touching moment. There, Jim returned Rosa's bag to Miguel and said, "This is yours." But surprisingly, Miguel said he didn't want the money, because it belonged to the cartel. "I don't need that dirty money," he said. Wow, what a wise boy. The next day, they finally entered the Chicago suburbs. But, from the bridge, two bald men, Mauricio's men, were already waiting and watching Jim pass by. One of them immediately called Mauricio, giving him the news that their target was almost there. Jim, who had sharp instincts, immediately realized that he was being followed. Without thinking much, he exited the highway and took a small road in the countryside. A chase ensued. Jim stepped on the gas, but his car couldn't handle it and started smoking, white smoke coming out of the hood. Seeing this, Jim quickly hid Miguel in an old barn. There, he gave him instructions. "If anything happens to me, you must run as far as you can and don't stop." Jim also prepared a diversion plan. He told Miguel to count to 30, then Jim fired 2 shots into the air to draw the attention of his pursuers. After Miguel's deception and diversionary shots, Jim managed to take down the rest of Mauricio's men. But unfortunately, Mauricio still managed to catch Miguel and use him as a shield. In a cornered position, Mauricio even put Miguel's finger on the trigger of the gun, forcing the boy to shoot Jim. But it turns out that Miguel has a way. He secretly removes the magazine from his gun, thus canceling Mauricio's sadistic scenario. The fight is inevitable. At a critical moment, Mauricio's gun falls, and Miguel immediately picks it up and gives it to Jim. Mauricio, who is increasingly cornered, challenges Jim to kill him. Mauricio had time to return Jim's Bintang Jasa medal that he had taken at Jim's house, as a symbol of respect, or perhaps some kind of regret. Jim then returns his gun, while saying, "Now, you have a choice." And door. A single shot is heard from inside the warehouse. Mauricio finally chooses to end his own life. The next day, the two of them arrived in Chicago. In front of his aunt's house, Jim handed Miguel his star medal, the last symbol of the courage and sacrifice they had gone through together. Miguel then knocked on his aunt's door, and Jim turned around, walking away with a limp body. He got on a bus, sat, alone. Silently, Jim looked at the wound on his left stomach. His shot in the last battle began to show its effects. Blood seeped, his breathing was heavy, his eyes slowly closed, and the screen went black. And the movie ended. Life always gives us choices, even in the darkest of times. Jim Henson is an illustration that true courage is not just about shooting or fighting, but about protecting the weak, keeping promises, and keeping your conscience alive, even though the world has lost its conscience. This film also teaches that being a hero doesn't require a uniform, just courage, and a heart that doesn't let evil win silently. That's the action-packed and touching story of the Marksman. Don't forget, courage sometimes comes from the most unexpected places, like an old rancher who chooses to fight for the sake of a child's future. If you like stories like this, click like, share, and of course subscribe to the latest Movie Stories channel. Also, activate the bell so you don't miss other exciting movie stories. See you in the next movie story. Because here, every story has meaning, and every ending leaves a mark. Latest Movie Stories, a place where stories come alive.